Hello everyone and welcome to another video. My name is Lance and today we're going to take a look at some unseen content from Dark Souls 3. And for this we're going to be spending our day at Archdragon Peak to see some very early designs. What we have here is a large proportion of Archdragon Peak, but back from an earlier time in the game's development when the area was simply titled The Bridge. So here we have the main entrance to Archdragon Peak as it appears in the final game. And by comparison, here is an extremely old design of how the same section was originally planned to look. These assets come from a far earlier conceptual stage in Dark Souls 3's development, before being imported into the game and polished and made playable. We're able to render them in the game engine using the built-in model viewing tool. For the most part, this entrance area remained the same through to its final version, although with a few less handrails in the end. The original draft also has a few motifs that actually come from Bloodborne's Forbidden Castle Cainhurst, as well as a lot more artwork adorning the area above the main entrance. Moving ahead a little is the area where we'd first encounter the Wyvern in the final version. The area adorned with statues making reference to the Nameless King. The earliest designs of the area featured a lot more lush greenery, especially around the small balcony where the ornamental bell would usually be found. And here we see what will become a recurring theme, the fact that the original designs depict a far less decrepit overall look to all of the buildings. While most are still in a state of disrepair regardless, the original draft designs give us a bit more insight into how some of these buildings might have theoretically looked in the past. The main building here also features some interesting artwork above the entrance. Continuing along the path, eventually to our left we'd find a room with a gaping hole in the wall and roof, through which the nearby Wyvern will often throw fire. The alpha layout here shows a much more compact area with no such ruin. Moving onwards, the staircase from here is located further to the right, whereas in the final game we remain partially indoors as we ascend these stairs. The older design instead wraps around the outside of the building. Ahead from here, there's an optional path to the left. Heading through a small corridor, there's nothing to be found immediately to the right, so we instead can only continue to the left, up a spiralling staircase. When we reach the top, we find a mostly intact building. The final design of this area instead does have a staircase to the right just as we leave the small corridor. And ascending the spiral staircase takes us to the same structure, but this time it's barely recognisable when compared to the original design due to the level of dilapidation. As usual, the older asset gives us a good look at how this building would have appeared earlier in the history of Archdragon Peak. The path forward leads directly to the Dragonkin Mausoleum, with a few staircases to be traversed along the way. The alpha designs follow this similarly, although with handrails and a very different decorative aesthetic. Once inside the Dragonkin Mausoleum, we find a fairly large open area that's pouring with detail. Chains and cloth hang from all over, and a huge gaping hole is found in the roof. Other than the distinct lack of detail, the primary difference here in the oldest design is the fact that a long bridge extends across the highest inaccessible level of the mausoleum. Interestingly, this matches exactly with one of the oldest, initially leaked pieces of concept art for Dark Souls 3. The other difference here is that in the final version of the Dragonkin Mausoleum, it's possible to completely circumnavigate the upper floor, which gives access to 2 balconies and a shortcut elevator. The older design has small handrails and gaps preventing access to the opposite side after ascending the staircases. Eventually we'd come to the main bridge, above which the Nameless King would be fought in Archdragon Peak's final act. A small portion of the bridge also exists amongst the design drafts, showing a mostly unspectacular chunk of the area. The bridge here at least has a base where we can see that it's built upon an interesting rock structure. Also towards the end of the area we come to the Great Belfry, where we can ring a bell and continue past to find a bonfire. An older version of this area appears to have a far smaller balcony for where we'd eventually ring the bell. Continuing into the Belfry actual, the bonfire is housed inside a small disinteresting room with another great hole in the ceiling. The original design, however, first took us through another small outdoor area before opening up into a large room with staircases leading up either side. The path to the left eventually opens up to a balcony. The opposite side similarly takes us upwards, but cuts off before we can see to where it would have led. The exterior of the Belfry is in a state of complete disrepair in the final version of the game, with this upper bridge broken and not leading anywhere. That same bridge is in the earlier design, unclear as to whether it once served some purpose. The entire structure is looking far healthier overall as well. The main bell tower can also be seen nearby here. The older design of the tower bearing mostly the same features, although a more open design. At the base we once again find some assets taken from Bloodborne's Castle Cainhurst, as well as some other interesting artwork. Now what I want to show you is the low polygon distance model associated with these earlier designs, as there's a huge area here that never made it into the final game. For the most part, the layout seen here does match up with what we would find in the finished product. However, as we pan past the main bridge and over towards the Great Belfry, we find this colossal area that we've never seen before. Let me see if I can help make sense of what you're seeing here. On the left we have the Great Belfry, and directly below us is what I like to call the Path of the Dragon leading up to the dragon statue. So you can see that this huge area spanning the entire center and right hand side of the screen is not present in the final game. The low fidelity nature of the asset here obviously leaves a lot to the imagination. However, I am able to at least show you one large piece of this area, this large section of broken pathways and structures. The amount of detail here is really quite impressive for something that would end up being discarded. This all leads up to a large building that seems to consist of a number of collapsed floors. Returning to what I refer to as the Path of the Dragon, we pass through this crumbling structure along the way. However, this was originally intended to serve a much different purpose. This same building can be seen here, wholly disconnected from any other area, and internally titled Bridge, Boss Room, Front, Base. For the most part, the building's in far better condition, and a whole further back section exists through which the player would have once travelled. Interesting is that as we come to the end of this path, tree roots and growths can be seen encroaching on the structure. And these tree roots lead into what is called the Bridge Boss Room's base. Indeed, an entire boss room was once planned to exist in the area, inside a colossal tree. Stone slabs are placed around the room with scribbled lines drawn across them, and a huge pedestal exists at the top of a two-tiered staircase at the far end. A look at the outside of the boss room helps appreciate the amount of effort that went into creating this design. Well, I hope you managed to enjoy this look at some of the oldest designs for Archdragon Peak. It's certainly a rare opportunity to get to see something like this, so I hope you don't mind that I take my time trying to show every detail, even where there's not much about them to be said. Often, I don't know much more than you do about what we're seeing here, so it's best for me to just show everything I can, without trying to skew anything with my own interpretations. If you did manage to enjoy this video, feel free to let me know by hitting the like button or leaving a friendly comment below. I do still have a lot more left to show, so if you'd like to keep up with my work here, be sure to subscribe if you haven't already. You can find more ways to follow and support my work in the description, and either way, thank you for watching, I'll see you next time.